In this video, we're going to look at Cut2D's ability to import 3D toolpaths from some of the other Vectric software and show you how to use that to create the house number sign that you can see on the screen here. This is a short version of the tutorial where we're just going to work through this process to show you how quick and easy it is to do. There is a much longer version of the video that you can watch if you want to see an in-depth explanation at each stage. For this example, we're going to use 3D toolpaths that were generated in a program called Vectric 3D Machinist. This is a free download from the Vectric 3D website, and in the longer version of the video there's detailed information about how to access that. We're not going to go into detail on the process for that particular software because there are videos that cover it on the website. As well as using Vectric 3D Machinist, this same process could also be used for toolpaths created in Cut3D or Photo VCarve as well. So before we start work in Cut2D, let's just open a copy of the Machinist software, and I'll open the file that we're going to import into Cut2D so you can see what this looks like at the stage where we generate the 3D toolpaths. Here, if I just work through the stages, we can see that we originally set up the size of this job in Machinist, then we calculated a roughing and a finishing toolpath on it, and ultimately on the last stage of the process in the software we saved this file as a V3M file, which is its original format, but now it would contain the toolpaths that we generated in the program here, and the toolpaths are what we're going to import into Cut2D next. As I mentioned, the process for using this software is covered in detail on the Vectric 3D website in tutorial videos there. Let's go ahead and exit out of the Machinist program, and we'll start a copy of Cut2D. And we'll begin by creating a new file. I'm going to make our job 10 inches wide, 12 inches high, Z0 on the top of the block, 3/4 of an inch material thickness, and XY datum in the lower left hand corner, and we're working in inches so we can go ahead and hit OK. Now we want to import our toolpaths from the 3D file. So I'm going to come up to the File drop down, choose Import and slide across to Import Photo VCarve Machinist or Cut3D toolpaths. When we click on that, in the project folder I can see the file that I saved there that has those toolpaths in it. If we select that and hit open, the software will automatically go into the 3D view and it'll display those toolpaths for me. If we tile the windows here so we can see the 2D view on the left and the 3D view on the right, you can see the way these toolpaths are represented in the 2D view is with this grayscale. This is nice because I can select it, click on it, move that around, or if we want to position that very precisely, then I can click here to align the selected objects and align in the center of the material and close the alignment tools form. Now it's worth mentioning here that it's not possible to change the size of this or the depth of this. It's only possible to move its position around within X and Y. Now I'm going to create some vectors for our design, so I'm going to click on the icon here to draw an ellipse. For this I'm going to set the anchor to be in the middle of the job at X5, Y6, and we'll give it a width of 8 and a height of 10 and hit create and close. Next I want to create the house number text, so I'm going to click on the draw text icon. I'm going to type 1862. From the font list I've selected Trebuchet MS. If you don't have that, just use a font of your own choice. I'm going to set this to not be bold or italic, so make sure they're unchecked, and we're going to put in a text height of 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to set that again to have the anchor position of X5, Y6 and hit apply and close. Now I'm going to select that and just hold shift and move it vertically upwards. Then I'm going to select this grayscale for the toolpaths, and I'm just going to use the transform move icon to move that relative to its current position -1 inch in Y. So we'll hit apply and close on that. Now with this number I'm going to select it again, come into edit text spacing and curve. I'm going to click on the green node at the top to bend that upwards, and then just click in between some of these to tighten up the spacing. Now I'm just going to go back to selection mode. We'll click on that and just use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move that around until I'm happy with its position in the job. At this point I have all the data I need to start calculating my toolpaths, so I'm going to click on the icon to switch over to the Toolpaths tab. Let's go ahead up to View, tile windows vertical to just refocus the two windows that I've got there and fit them into my view window. Now before we calculate any more toolpaths, let's just take a look, and we can see that when we imported those toolpaths they were added to my toolpath list. So if I switch the visibility, I've got the roughing and finishing there already shown up because we've imported that data. Now I want to create toolpaths that are going to complement that. Before we do that though, I need to check my material setup. So let's click on set and take a look, and I'll just quickly see Z0 off the top of the block, material thickness 3/4 of an inch, XY0 lower left, rapid and home position all safe and appropriate, so we can hit OK. If you plan to machine this file, then you need to make sure that you do choose values that are appropriate for your particular setup. If you're calculating the toolpaths, make sure that you pick feeds and speeds that will be safe for the tooling that you have available and the material you plan to cut, and that would include potentially going back into Vectric 3D Machinist and recalculating the 3D toolpaths if necessary. Here what I want to do is pocket now out between this edge and between our fleur-de-lis. Before we do that though, it might be worthwhile just to preview the existing toolpaths we've got so we can see what we're working with. So let's just deselect in the 2D view for a moment there. Let's come over and put this into an ISO view. I'm going to select the roughing toolpath, go into the preview and preview selected toolpath. So we can see what that's going to look like after it's roughed out. Now if we select the finishing and preview, I can see what that's going to look like, and we can make sure that that looks okay. Next, as I say, I want to pocket out between this ellipse and that shape there. I don't have a vector for this, but if I select the grayscale, the edge of it will in effect act as a vector. However, I need to know how deep I want to machine this in order to match the edge of our 3D part. If in the toolpath list I hover over the finishing toolpath, I can see the max depth in the box that pops up there is 0.4 of an inch. So if we just close the preview toolpath form, from the 2D view select the ellipse, shift and select the grayscale, come over and click on the icon to pocket out between those. I'm going to start at 0 and go to a cut depth of 0.4 because that's how deep my finishing toolpath cut. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch end mill offset strategy and then just give that a name and hit calculate. There we can see my toolpath calculated between the outside and the grayscale, and we can preview that in order to see what it will look like when it's machined, and we can make sure that that bottom depth matches up with the edge of our part. So that looks really good there. Next, what I want to do is select the text here, so let's just close the preview toolpath form, click on the text there, the number, click on the pocket toolpath icon. Now we've already machined this area down to a depth of 0.4, so I can use that as a start depth and then just add a cut depth of 0.1 on top of that. We'll use the same tool here, same settings, and we'll just call that pocket text and hit calculate. We can preview that to make sure that looks okay and the tool's able to fit and give us all the detail we want. We can close the preview toolpath form again. Then finally we can select our ellipse here and we can cut the part out. So I'm going to come over and click on the icon to profile around the job. I want to cut all the way through the material, and I'm going to grab that value from the software itself by typing Z equals, and that will fill in the material thickness that we've got set for the part. I'm going to make sure Show Advanced Toolpath Options is checked here. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill from the tool database, so we can just select that there. I'm going to cut outside the vector, but to make sure I don't leave any little bits of material, because I'm pocketed and I'm profiling to the same vector, I'm going to undercut the part here a little bit. So I'm going to put in a value of negative 0.05 of an inch. So that's going to undercut that ellipse by 0.05 of an inch on each side, and that'll make sure that we don't leave any material around the edge. Instead of that, if we wanted to, we could just create another ellipse and use that for the pocket to make sure that toolpath goes past the edge of our part. I'm going to add some tabs to hold the part in place, so we'll click on the Edit Tabs button, and I'm just going to click to edit the tabs there at the size that we already had entered in the form. Hit close. Now we can come down and provide a name for the toolpath here. and hit calculate. If we preview that, we can see what the part's going to look like. We can see it's being cut all the way through the material, and we can see the tabs that are going to hold the part in place when we cut it out. If you had something like a vacuum hold down, you may not need to use those. If we close the preview toolpath form, what we need to do now is make sure that the part looks correct, and if it is, we can go ahead and select each of these toolpaths in turn, click on the icon to save the toolpaths, choose a post-processor that will put these into a language that's appropriate for our machine or our control software, and then hit on Save Toolpaths button, give the file a name, hit save, and that's the file that I'm going to actually send over to my CNC machine in order to do the roughing. I'm not going to save that myself, but if I wanted to, I could now choose the finishing and save that, and then carry on through all these other toolpaths until I've got all the set of toolpaths that's going to cut the part that we can see here. So that almost concludes this video. Here you've seen a short example of this process to import 3D toolpaths from one of the other Vectric programs into Cut2D and add complementary 2D toolpaths to that. Just worth reiterating before we finish that although we use Vectric 3D Machinist in this example, you could generate these toolpaths using Photo VCarve, Cut3D or Partworks 3D as well. If you want to see a more detailed version of this video, then there is a longer example of this tutorial with much more in-depth explanations of each of the stages. Thanks for watching.